Alvin Christian, about the investment outlook in the Indonesian market and how to mitigate the risk. Next, we'll hear from James Palin on how the Omnibus Law affects hiring. And last but not least, we have a friend with us, Pak Rudi Manik, who will speak about how the Omnibus Law impacts Indonesia's businesses. We'll then do a Q&A session, and after that, we'll wrap up the presentation. So, some ground rules to start off with. First of all, you are on mute by default. So only the panelists will be able to speak during the webinar. Two, you can use the Q&A tab to ask your questions. Please post your questions anytime, but we will only be answering the questions at the Q&A session at the end. Also, this webinar is recorded, and we'll share to you the link once it has finished. So you can rewatch it should you require more information, or you can pass the link on to your colleagues to allow themselves to view this webinar as well. So now we've got our introductions out of the way, we'll get right on to it. So the first speaker will be Pak Alvin Christian, who is the Managing Director of TMF Indonesia and the Practice Leader of A&T Southeast Asia. A brief introduction about who Alvin Christian is. So Alvin is currently the Managing Director of Indonesia and the Practice Leader of A&T Southeast Asia at TMF Group. He has a combined overseas and local experience of over 20 years in the field of strategic leadership, corporate finance, accounting, and general management areas in diverse industries. Most recently, Alvin was the country CFO and legal director Indonesia of G4S, Group for Securicor. Alvin has a PSBA degree in accounting from Northeastern University with an MS degree in finance and economics from Boston University. He is a qualified accountant, a CPA, under CPA Australia, and a certified analyst, FMVA, under Corporate Finance Institute. Alvin, over to you.
Thank you, Emmanuel, for that introduction, and thank you everyone for joining us and taking part in this webinar where we have quite a few different areas to cover, interesting topics to discuss with you all. Hope everyone is doing well and staying safe and sound. As an opener, I thought it would be good for us to for me to give a quick overview of who we are, TMF Group in Indonesia. So TMF Group in Indonesia, or TMF Group as an organization, simply put, we help a company to expand throughout the different jurisdictions in a safe and compliant manner. We have about 8,000 individuals or consultants that sit throughout the 85 jurisdictions we have across the world. We are globally certified from an ISO 27001 about data protection, as well as ISAE 3402 about internal control or control for a service company or service organization. We have about 15,000 global clients, group clients. We serve majority, 2/3 of the Fortune 500 companies, as well as the Financial Times 100 Index. We provide services in the discipline of corporate secretarial, entity management, accounting and tax, HR and payroll services, as well as capital market support. Hopping over to the current condition and market outlook. So probably be good to start with the reminder slide of where we are at the moment, right? State of the world, we call it, right? By and large, world has been impacted by the pandemic, right? Some of the strongest and largest and fastest growing economies were not immune to the impact. China being one, India another one, as well as Indonesia there, all have been impacted, in a most disruptive manner. China, if someone, were to tell me or had told me that they would be growing at a rate that's less than 2% a year ago, I would have said the person was joking, right? But obviously, that's the reality we where we are now. Same with India and obviously Indonesia. So I'd like to draw your attention a bit on this about the column of the 2019 on the GDP of the different countries there, the essentially the growth, the GDP growth of the different countries there. Indonesia is on the fourth row there, registering 5.0% GDP growth for 2019, currently anticipating anywhere from a negative 1.6 to a negative 0.2 GDP contraction, right? For the foreseeable future, or at least for 2021, you can see there that we are, if you look at the World Bank section there, which I think probably is the most neutral, compared to the other ones in here, right? I think one quite bullish, the other one is quite pessimistic and so on. So World Bank would we are anticipating a recovery in 2021, right, to 4.4% on the moderate case or baseline case, and 3.0% GDP growth recovery or return to GDP growth in a low case, or maybe worst case scenario. Okay. Focusing on Indonesia a little bit, Indonesia GDP growth is going through a contraction period for the last 2 quarters. In June, 5.3%, and a slight sign of recovery in Q3 of a negative 3.5% contraction. While on the surface, we should view this as a positive sign of recovery, we should also be cognizant that recovery doesn't come from the biggest part of the economy, which is the consumption. The GDP of Indonesia is heavily reliant on domestic consumptions. I think a good 56-57% of the GDP made up of household consumption. So as displayed here on the right side there, the recovery on the household consumption as well as investment have been marginal. So the recovery that we are seeing in Q3 mainly coming from the government expenditures, right? So the 9.8% growth there, which you could see all the way back to the March 18, is the largest ever or largest spending. You can see there, showing the commitment of the government to ensure stability and to protect and support the most vulnerable of the society, right? So this is the I think the program itself is called the PEN, the National Economic Recovery Program, right? With about close to 700 trillion rupiah or IDR committed or earmarked to support the effort, right? And last observation we had was a good more than half of that amount being properly allocated or dispersed to the targeted industries, sectors, people, and so on and so forth. So next slide, please. In terms of the COVID-19 impact to Indonesia, from our observation, data suggesting that some industries are more resilient than others in taking on the COVID or the pandemic impact. You can see there some of the sectors that are experiencing a downturn in a significant way. Some of the ones that are somewhat relatively stable, taking an impact, but not to the point where it's immensely disruptive to the business. And then some of the sectors that are experiencing an upside or an upturn, from the fact that people have to work from home, from the disruption in the supply chain and transportation, logistic side, and so on and so forth, right? So you can see there some of the things worth highlighting are the media and telco, the home working goods and services, the food delivery, right, the logistics, and cloud services. In terms of looking ahead for Indonesia, right, I think at a high level, simplistically, there are three different curves to address. One, without a doubt, is the pandemic curve. And that's the most challenging and one that we are experiencing right now, right, in terms of flattening the curve, having a good contact tracing, and expanding the capacity of our health infrastructure to to treat and to also to distribute vaccination if and when they become available, right? Did a basic math on this. I think there are about 10,000 puskesmas spread out throughout the country, right? If you think about that at the high level, 10,000 seems like a lot, but if you start, doing the math of there are 270 million, close to 80 million people in Indonesia, then it's quite a tremendous challenge for us to overcome. Even for once the vaccine becomes available, right? In terms of how to register those vaccination properly throughout the population. So that's number one. And then you have the recession curve. Obviously, that's what we were in, the slides that we flashed earlier, right? We've been contracting for the past 12 quarters, so effectively we are in recession. So I think the government has been doing all the right things, showing the commitment, showing the investment, and I think been managed quite well. And then you have the question of the debt curve of Indonesia, right, which is obviously a consequence of the intervention or the easing, and the support given by the government, right? So that's another one that we need to pay close attention. Once we get the pandemic curve behind us, once we get the recession curve behind us. The debt curve is the least of our concerns, I would say, because given compared to our neighboring countries who are sort of in the same stage as us, maybe in Southeast Asia, our debt rating, or not debt level of the country is still in one of the lowest, which is great, right? With these three curves to address and to overcome, the government still has has a very, very ambitious goal to have Indonesia to be a high income economy. I think top 5 of the world GDP by 2045, right? Which happens to be the 100-year anniversary of the independence for Indonesia, right? So that has been the goal, and that continues to be the goal of the government. which is quite remarkable in my view, given the challenges we're now in. So really, encouraged by the optimism of the government to reach there. So how do we get there, right? Is the question, right? The reality is, Indonesia still facing a number of challenges, right? One of which is the complexity in Indonesia, right? Annually at TMF Group, we conduct what we call a global complexity index, which is which is a study done on the 85 jurisdictions that we have our footprint on, right? Based on the different disciplines that we are in, right? One is the accounting tax, secondary is the rules, regulations, and penalties, and the third one is the labor law environment of the country. So for 2020, Indonesia has been rated the most complex jurisdiction globally by our internal business complexity index. Reason being are essentially the reasons listed here. Some of the areas with rising complexity, one being the regulation obesity, with 30,000 plus combined regulations at the different levels of governments as well as municipalities, right? The stringent manpower law in country, which makes it quite difficult and challenging for organizations to take disciplinary actions in a unilateral manner against employees, particularly the underperforming one. The punitive, tax regime, right, with significant fines and penalties, and then a overly granular, I would say, regulated sector of business. There's about 515 business sectors or business fields being regulated in country, which restricts the percentage of ownership, within the specific industry sector. That said, there are definitely some drivers of simplicity that we have been observing. One being the launch of the OSS, the Online Single Submission System, by the Investment Coordinating Board, BKPM, a couple of years back. That obviously has allowed us a simpler way to incorporate, right? Number two is the anticipated or upcoming conversion of the negative investment list into the investment priority list or the positive list of investments, which is expected to be in place by the end of 2020. Right? Not there yet, addressed in the omnibus, but not finalized or distributed yet, which will open up a lot more sectors in the Indonesian economy to foreign direct investment, right? Last piece here, quite significant as well, is the Omnibus Law itself, right, which will addresses the multitude of regulations and laws in place, ranging from the labor law, the investment law, the taxation regulations, and so on and so forth. So that study that we have done, I think, also in alignment with the ease of doing business, where Indonesia is ranked, I believe, 73 for 2020 out of 150 jurisdictions, or 100, is that right? 190 jurisdictions, sorry, globally. Again, highlighting the complexity that still underpins the challenge, or the underpins the investment environment overall in Indonesia. A quick glance of how we would compare against our neighbors. Comparing to let's say Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, and the Philippines. Highlighted in red here are some of the areas where we, still not as competitive as our neighboring countries. Right, from a minimum wage perspective, we're still the highest income in the region, or at least comparing to those neighbors. Industrial land price, the same thing. Electricity, where is one where we are slightly better than our neighboring countries. And then the last two there is what I touched on earlier, which is the minimum investment for foreign investment in country, which is a 10 billion rupiah minimum to be committed within first year of operations in country, when compared to our neighbors where they have no minimum investment requirement, right? And then I think what I mentioned earlier is about the regulated business sectors, whereby there are about 515 in Indonesia compared to 6 in Vietnam, 4 in Thailand, 45 in Malaysia, 34 in the Philippines. Just to show again the complexity, still there for businesses, foreign direct investment to safely invest and expand into the market. So next, thought be helpful to give a quick overview of the Omnibus Law. So the Omnibus Law itself covers 9 different topic areas, right? Some of them I mentioned earlier. So one being manpower, the other one is of doing business, and there are other areas such as improvement of investment in business ecosystem, research and innovation, special economic zone, public service obligation, implementation of government administration, land procurement, and cooperative and MSME, which is micro, small, medium enterprises. So for the purposes of our discussion today, cover the first, or maybe the investment and the tax changes covered in the omnibus, and then I think our next panelists, James and Rudy, will cover some of the changes in the labor law itself. So the investment legislation, as mentioned earlier, anticipating a investment priority list or positive of investment to come out by the end of the year, which will open up a number of the sectors that are either fully closed or partially closed to foreign investment currently, right? So out of the 20 business sectors that were previously closed to foreign investors, now only 6 left, close to the foreign investors. And then what is being people are waiting on right now is obviously the remainder of it, which is the 495 sectors still regulated in the negative investment list currently. The other part, what noteworthy here is the simplification of business licenses, to incorporate and to have a business operating in Indonesia, where in the past you need a minimum of 7 licenses, to be able to stand up your business in Indonesia, to operate, and have a proper business licenses, from the getting the deed of article of association done, getting the approval of Ministry of Law and Human Rights, getting the tax ID, you're getting the domicile out of the way, and anything else that may need to be in place, such as AMDAL as listed here. Um, uh, the, 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 the process has been simplified as such that now a risk-based licensing approach has been adopted based on the potential risks, whether it's environment, safety, health, natural resources, exposures to the country, right? So for businesses and sectors classified as low risk, then only the business identity number, or NIB, would be required for the business to be operational. And then for medium risk, then there would be additional requirement, such as that standard certification of goods, for instance. And then for the high risk ones, then you would need the NIB plus a proper business license, which would then have a number of other requirements underneath them in order for you to stand up and be operational. On the tax side of things, number of changes as well, but some of the high level noteworthy things here are the on the VAT side, changes are that consignment delivery no longer subjected to VAT, right? And then the other one that's welcomed by the different businesses are the fact that entity in pre-production stage, would now be eligible to claim input VAT as opposed to just absorbing that, which is obviously welcome change. And then another one is the fact that the tax invoice can now be issued without buyer identity. Another noteworthy one there is change in the penalty. I think one of the hurdles or major hurdles of Indonesia is that punitive tax regime, right? So the way the penalty has been redefined, right? Change of the penalty rate using a standard 5%, for the prevailing interest rate plus 5%, for any 12 months period. And then the other part that's welcome change is the cap of the penalty for late tax payment, which is now at the 24 months maximum cap. The other one noteworthy here on the income tax side is I think the dividends, which is now going to be exempt from taxation, and provided that the amount from the dividend is reinvested in the Indonesian economy for a certain period of time, and meet the 30% of minimum threshold of profit after tax and invested before DGT issues tax assessment later. I think those are some of the main ones I'd like to highlight here. So maybe with that, I'd like to conclude my presentation and hand it back to the moderator.
Okay, thank you, Alvin. That's very, very insightful and very detailed on the market outlook and a bit of the update on the Omnibus Law. Thank you for that. So now I would like to pass it on to James Palin, who will be speaking about the Omnibus Law and how it impacts the hiring. James, over to you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Emmanuel. Thanks for that, Alvin. Okay, so if you just move on to the next slide for me. So let me give you a brief introduction to myself. So I've been in recruitment now for about 15 years. So I've had all across Asia. So I started out in developing countries, started out in Tokyo, moved on to Singapore, Hong Kong, And more recently, I've moved into the developing countries. So I've spent about the last 5 years now, 4 or 5 years in both Thailand, and then more recently, I've moved on to Indonesia. So I've seen a lot of different cultures, a lot of different labor laws, a lot of different ways of hiring, and dealt with a number of different types of clients from small startup all the way through to obviously the large Fortune 500 as well. So we've got, you know, I must say that it's the first time I've ever been in a country where they've changed the labour law that affects the entire country, the way that all of our clients can hire. So it's very, very interesting. And that's obviously why we wanted to put this event together today, because while there's a lot of different areas to cover, there are a few areas which have already been made clear in the Omnibus Law. So we've had that reviewed by our lawyers, and we've got certain things that we can share with you today that we hope will be useful for you. And there's also a number of areas which are not clear yet, which a lot of you will be aware of, which are upcoming laws that will be regulated, will be changed as well. So if you just move on to the next slide. So if you haven't heard of Monroe, so we've been here for 15 years in Indonesia. So we're one of the main recruitment players here. And we look at your typical contingency recruitment, retained search. And more recently, and really since COVID, you know, lots of other types of recruitment have really been becoming more popular in Indonesia. So RPO, obviously since the Omnibus Law has been passed, we've got contract recruitment now as well, talent mapping. So outplacement as well, which has been another service for obvious reasons, which has seen a big increase for us. So the business has changed a lot in the last year, probably more in the last 6 months than it has in the last 15 years. So it's a very, very interesting time. And now we're part of a much bigger organization called Empresaria, a global organization based out of the UK. So we actually have offices all over the world. And, you know, when we look at all of the different offices and, you know, you look at Monroe, which covers Southeast Asia, all of the developing countries, the most change when it comes to recruitment is happening here right now. So next slide. So the Omnibus Law has been brought into place by President Jokowi to really bring more business to Indonesia, to make it easier to set up businesses here, to make it more flexible for those companies to then hire as well. I think one of the main issues when you look at, you know, perhaps Singapore, Hong Kong, other countries, when a business is looking to set up, when they're looking to open up new offices, branch offices, or startup companies that are looking to set up, what you find is that those companies are not coming to Indonesia as much as they are to our neighbours. And that's something that, you know, has been discussed on a global stage for quite a long time now. And it's really now that these changes are starting to happen. So you can see there the goals and the dream for Indonesia and where they want to get to by 2045, and it's a big goal, but certainly, you know, this is something that we've already seen having a positive effect on the country when it comes to investment. So there's a huge amount of investment coming in, a lot of startup businesses here. We've got 5 main unicorns already in this country, 1 decacorn as well. So, you know, there's no shortage of companies here, but it's the big international companies and you know, the likes of the Googles, Amazon Web Services, Amazon, Microsoft that weren't here in such a big way. And one of the barriers there was that Indonesia was always seen as high risk, quite complex, big spider web of different laws and regulations which you need to go through to get a license here, to be able to operate here as a PT registered business. But then past that, hiring. So how do you hire people? When you can only hire permanent employees, and certainly in the white collar sector, you can't hire contractors, it makes it very high risk, because being able to hire someone is part of the process, but depending on the lengths of projects, the companies growing and shrinking, you need to let people go as well. Being able to do that in Indonesia was always a very slow and a very drawn out process, which has made it, higher risk. Thus, companies just don't come here. They set up offices in other countries. And, that's really the overall macro goal of what President Jokowi is doing here. Next slide. So this is what I'll go over today with you briefly. As I mentioned, there's a lot of points to be covered here, but we'll keep it relatively brief. And obviously, if people have specific questions, we can go through that afterwards, or anything further outside of that. Obviously, you can reach out to me at Monroe directly as well. But there's a few main changes here. The labour law is the one that obviously I'm most interested in. This is massive news for us, and it's very, very interesting. And when you start to dig into the Omnibus Law, there are still some grey areas, as I mentioned, but this selection and placement of domestic labour and the provisions around human resources and human resource function are the main questions we've been getting. So when we're talking to our clients, and there's also a lot of people reaching out to us at the moment as well, because they want to know, what does this mean for my business? What can we do? And can we do this type of hiring? What kind of contract do we need in place? Can you outsource labour to us? Can you help advise us on what's happening here? So this is the main part that I'll cover today. So next slide, please. So it's worth me briefly just discussing to you. So obviously, a lot of the people who are listening to me now will be used to permanent employment. You're probably a permanent employee now, and you're probably used to hiring people or, managing people who are permanent employees. And, that's certainly in the white collar sector, that's predominantly, how Indonesia is run, certainly with the clients that we're dealing with. So what you need to understand now is really, when we're talking about and when they're addressing these points in the Omnibus Law, what is outsourcing and what is temporary contracting? So really, outsourcing is just another way of hiring people. So essentially, you are outsourcing that process to an outsourcing company who will completely manage your staff. They will completely pay those staff, cover all of their insurance, all of the management decisions, hiring, firing, all of that is controlled by the outsourcing company. And, that's generally seen more so at the blue collar level. So when you're talking about, different types of industrial work, factory work, building, mining, lots of areas that outsourcing is covered. And outside of Indonesia, also at a more senior level as well. But, we'll touch on why the terminology is important here, because it is slightly different in the Omnibus Law. But that's essentially what outsourcing is. It's you have no control over those employees. That's completely owned and controlled by the outsourcing business. Now, when you talk about temporary contractors, this is different. So this is you as a business or you as a client, as an employer, will employ these people. You will have control of these people, and you will employ them as you would a normal employee, actually day to day on the shop floor or on the office floor. You wouldn't be able to know the difference between the contract labour and the full-time labour, apart from obviously their contracts. And that's the main differentiator, that now there is a choice in terms of how you can hire. And that is very, very important for companies to start to understand. And, certainly with the landscape that we're in at the moment, with the pandemic, with recession, you've got upwards of 4 million people unemployed in Indonesia. Companies generally wouldn't be able to hire, maybe because downturn in business, looking to save costs, etc. But coercively also need to grow. So what contracting does is it allows companies to have the flexibility of hiring people on a short-term contract, whether that's 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, or really up to the employer as to what they would like to do, how long their project is, and there's so much more flexibility there. What the government here have done a great job in terms of doing as well is making sure that even if you are hiring someone on a contract, that the rights of the employee is maintained, is looked after should anything go wrong, and they've gone into detail to and we'll cover that a little bit, and Rudy will also go into that in a little bit more detail. But essentially, what the Omnibus Law and how the wording is outsourcing refers to blue collar, and when they're talking about temp contractors, they're really talking about white collar. And that's how the wording is in the Omnibus Law. So those are the main two differences. And when you read it and when you go through it, there's well over 1,000 pages in there. So that's just the difference in terms of the terminology. Next slide, please, Emmanuel. So when we're talking about the outsourcing and temp contract side of things, so these are some of the points which have been amended, some of the points which have been added under the Omnibus Law, just to protect the rights of the workers. So we can go through these briefly. Certainly, number one, the relationship between the outsourcing company and the workers. So what it's stating here is that an agreement must be in place between those people. So if it's an outsourcing company, there'll be an agreement between the outsourcing company and the employee. When you are dealing with outsource and temp contracts, slightly different in terms of the wording of the contract. But when it comes to temp contracts, again, it's a direct agreement between the employer and the employee that both will agree to in terms of the period of time, the pay, etc. And that can either happen directly, or for example, if you're using Monroe as a temp contracting agency, you want us to look after your staff for you, you want us to pay them, cover the insurance and look after that side of things for you, to mitigate your risk and outlay that cost to a secondary agency, then we would have a direct contract with that employee, and we'd also then have a contract with you as well. So again, we can go into much more detail with you on that to cover that in more detail. One-to-one, if you obviously want to know more information about that, happy to discuss that. Protection of the workers, again, this comes down to the terminology within the contract when disputes arise. All of that must be in agreement with the law here in this country. So all of the regulations, responsibilities of the outsourcing company are made very, very clear. Point 3, in case of an outsourcing company employs workers in an agreement for a specified period of time. So the work agreement must require the transfer of the right protection for the worker. So what this is stating here very clearly is that if for whatever reason the outsourcing company goes out of business, or the temp contracting company, which is managing your employees for you if you're using them for payroll, etc., that there's a provision in place in that contract that then passes over the rights of that employee to the company or to another agency that will look after them. What that does is just stops any problems with bankruptcy or any number of things which are going on with the pandemic at the moment, that you would want to make sure that you are in a position as an employee where you feel comfortable and confident that you're not going to just lose your job tomorrow. So that's something that they've looked at here. And points 4, 5, and 6 are all very clear. What it's stating is that if you are operating in Indonesia as an outsourcing company or a temporary contracting business, you must have the right licenses in place. And they're very, very clear on this. Recruitment licenses, Monroe is one of the very few companies in Indonesia that actually has a recruitment license. It's very rare that recruitment companies will have that here. I really hope that the government change that law and make sure that everyone has to get one. But when it comes down to outsourcing, when it comes down to contracting, again, we have all of those licenses in place. It's really, really important as a company that if you are going to engage with agencies to look at outsourcing or contracting, that you make sure that they have all of those licenses as well. I think one of the advantages of the new system with the OSS as well is that for companies looking to come to Indonesia, this will make it much easier for them. Next slide, please. Okay, so, very briefly, as it is now, there's really been two ways to hire employees in this country. So we had permanent employment, which you're all familiar with, I'm sure. It's very stable. But what happens there is that you've got, often tech companies, certain businesses where you have very project-driven, ideals. Maybe you're hiring computer programmers, for example, for a 6-month project. Being able to hire them, was very difficult previously. And that was one of the main issues with permanent. Fixed-term employment agreements have been legal in this country. There were, 5 main positions that you were allowed to use a contract for. They were very clear under the previous law, which were kind of blue collar related to maids and drivers and security guards, etc. But there were, very favoured in terms of the employee there. If you had a 1-year contract, for example, and anything went wrong with that contract and you needed to end it after a few months, you would be, by law, you would have to pay that employee for the full year contract. And if you want to extend it after that, you can only extend it to the period of time that the contract was originally done for. So you can see how that, wasn't ideal for certain business sectors. But the new area that we're talking about here, which has come in on the contracting side, much more flexible. It really allows for companies to be able to bring on people. And I think, honestly, it's exciting for a number of people out there who, unfortunately have found themselves unemployed, because it gives companies, so many more opportunities to be able to hire these people. And, if you've got the option between nothing or, being able to take a short-term contract to get back into the workforce, of course, it's a fantastic option. And it's really going to allow more and more companies to be able to open up the doors to bring on people to help them grow on these, shorter-term contracts. And there is also that, ability to turn the contract into a full-time one as well. And that's absolutely possible. So, those are the main ways that companies can now hire here in Indonesia. Next slide, please. So, just to wrap things up, really, I think, when you look at recruitment in Asia, it's obviously a massive industry. I think if you look at Indonesia, it's still a pretty immature recruitment market. It's growing very, very quickly. And I think with these changes, it's going to accelerate even further as well. When you look at the likes of our neighbours in Singapore, for example, recruitment seen as, depending on what reviews you read, what articles you read, it's about $1.5 billion US business and growing. Upwards of 50-60% of that being very much on the contracting side of things. And if you look at, comparatively speaking, at the US, you're talking about under COVID, close to $120 billion business. So there's a massive, massive market. And Indonesia has always ranked quite low when it came to appealing countries to open up your business on a regional or global scale. And I think this really makes Indonesia a much more attractive option because, for me, it's been one of the, highlights of my career. It really has when it comes to recruitment and being able to work with the Indonesian population and help businesses to grow here. I think this just is an absolute game changer for Indonesia, I think, in terms of employment opportunities. So, companies which previously wouldn't have come here, I think now will. And I think companies that previously were having, issues around how they could hire here are now, going to have much more flexibility. Still early days for this, still a lot of educating to do on the market. But I think overall for the, the population in Indonesia, and certainly when you look at, more in the skilled labour sector and whether it's blue collar or white collar, this opens up a lot of opportunities for people to get new jobs, I think, and also for companies to hire as well, which is only going to help Indonesia grow and move up and really become a force to reckon with when you look at Southeast Asia. And when you look at new startup businesses and bigger global MNCs looking to come here as well. That's it from me. I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James, for that. That was very, very insightful on the hiring trends and the impacts of the Omnibus Law. I'm sure every one of us has been learning a lot. We have some questions coming in. As again, I would just like to remind that we will answer the questions at the end of the presentations. And should you wish to talk through your question, please put your name in the Q&A chat, and we will allow you to talk during the Q&A. Okay, I would like to move on. So the last but not least, we have Pak Rudi Manik, who is the Chief HR Officer of FWD Life Indonesia. Let me give you a quick introduction, Pak Rudi. So Pak Rudi is currently the Chief HR Officer and Executive Committee member at leading insurance company FWD Life Indonesia. With over 14 years of experiences in human resource management, he has held senior HR leadership functions in multinational companies from a diverse range of industries. Not to mention, he is an expert in recruitment, learning development, talent management, compensation and benefits, and industrial relations. Prior to his current role, Pak Rudi was the country chief HR officer of AXA Indonesia and board member of PT Asuransi AXA Indonesia. He is a certified human resource manager, CHRM, under American Certification Institute USA, and a certified risk governance professional, CRGP, under Lembaga Sertifikasi Profesi Manajemen Resiko. So, Pak Rudi, over to you.
All right, thank you, Emmanuel. So, selamat pagi everyone. Kalau di asuransi, selamat pagi terus ya. So, I think what Pak Alvin and James have explained to us is very comprehensive already. Hopefully, I can still bring some values to all participants today. Next slide, boleh lanjut, Manuel. Okay, I will take liberty to speak in Bahasa, of course, because I understand that all the participants can understand Bahasa. Very few slide, tetapi mudah-mudahan bisa sedikit menambah perspektif yang berbeda dari Bapak Ibu semua pada sore hari ini. Saya mencoba melihat dari sudut pandang pembuat undang-undang, kenapa sebenarnya job creation law ini dibuat. Jadi harapannya memang kalau kita coba bisa melihat dari sudut pandang pembuat undang-undang, kita sebagai praktisi di lapangan bisa menggunakan juga Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja ini sebagai peluang. Karena memang banyak hal-hal positif sebenarnya yang kita bisa dapatkan sebagai praktisi atau sebagai perusahaan dengan adanya Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja ini. Ini bukan pendapat saya pribadi. Saya coba saya ulang ke Bapak Ibu semua yang saya ambil dari naskah akademik dari Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja. Memang kalau dalam setiap pembuatan undang-undang di Indonesia itu ada yang disebut dengan naskah akademik. Jadi proses di mana melibatkan pihak-pihak pemikir ke dalam untuk melihat lebih detail apa-apa saja yang menjadi alasan dibuatnya sebuah undang-undang, kemudian landasan sosial, filosofis, dan juga landasan hukumnya kenapa undang-undang ini dibuat. Nah, yang pertama di sini kita bisa lihat Bapak Ibu ada gross domestic product. Memang Indonesia punya target dalam tahun 2040 harusnya sudah berada dalam Big Five dari sisi GDP. Nah, ini merupakan target pemerintah yang menjadi salah satu alasan kenapa job creation law ini dikeluarkan. Kemudian yang kedua, pertumbuhan ekonomi. Kalau kita lihat pertumbuhan ekonomi Indonesia ke belakang itu rata-rata 5%, dan kemudian ada terjadi kontraksi saat ini sehubungan dengan adanya pandemi. Nah, berdasarkan kalkulasi untuk bisa menjadi nomor 5 besar tahun 2040, rata-rata pertumbuhan ekonomi dibutuhkan minimal 6%. Minimal 6%. Nah, tentunya untuk mencapai 6% ini ada beberapa hal yang harus dilakukan pemerintah. Nah, yang ketiga itu adalah sumber daya alam. Sumber daya alam Indonesia itu juga luar biasa besarnya. Kembali lagi sebenarnya kita memiliki banyak hal yang bisa membantu investasi di Indonesia, sehingga cita-cita dari NKRI untuk bisa mencetak 5 besar GDP terbesar di dunia itu tahun 2040 bisa tercapai. Nah, kemudian ada situasi keempat nih, Bapak Ibu semua, yaitu ease of doing business. Ya, kita sama-sama tahu bahwa tingkat ease of doing business Indonesia masih sangat kurang kompetitif kalau dibandingkan dengan negara-negara, nggak usah keluar terlalu jauh ya. Di ASEAN saja kita masih banyak yang bisa ditingkatkan. Padahal sebenarnya ini sangat mendukung investasi, kemudian productivity, kemudian daya saing. Alasan yang kelima itu adalah demografi. Nah, demografi di sini lebih kepada jumlah penduduk yang produktif. Jadi sebenarnya mungkin Bapak Ibu sering mendengar istilah bonus demografi ya. Bonus demografi ini bukan hanya berbicara mengenai jumlah populasi, tetapi lebih kepada jumlah tenaga kerja yang produktif. Jadi ada berdasarkan projections itu kita akan memiliki rata-rata 6 orang yang produktif untuk membiayai total 10 orang. So 60% penduduk Indonesia akan berada dalam rentak waktu produktif dan ini akan bisa dirasakan sampai tahun 2030 ke 35. Nah, setelah nanti tahun 2030 ke 35 akan terjadi penurunan. Artinya apa? Kalau misalnya Indonesia tidak segera menyiapkan segala infrastruktur untuk bisa memanfaatkan bonus demografi, akan sangat sulit bagi Indonesia untuk bisa take off lagi pada saat bonus demografi ini berakhir di 2030-2035. Nah, ini peluang yang dilihat. Kemudian tentunya populasi di sini, jumlah penduduk tentunya juga merupakan market yang potensial, yang besar sekali untuk bisa dimanfaatkan. Nah, ini beberapa sebenarnya alasan-alasan yang kita lihat kenapa akhirnya pemerintah mengeluarkan job creation law. Di berbagai, mungkin Bapak Ibu sudah juga membaca beberapa literatur atau pendengar di beberapa media atau seminar. Secara total ada sekitar 79 ya, sekitar 70 plus undang-undang, 79 undang-undang yang diatur di dalam Omnibus Law ini, dan sekitar 1.200 plus pasal. Jadi memang pemerintah berusaha bagaimana tidak lagi terjadi tumpang tindih regulasi, bagaimana perizinan bisa lebih mudah, sehingga tentunya bisa meningkatkan investasi. Oke, next.
Okay, sorry to jump in, Pak Rudy, but can we continue the presentation in English because we have some. I was just informed that we have several of our attendees that are non-Bahasa speakers.
Sure.
Thank
All right.
you.
Next slide, please. All right. This works. Okay. What? I think this is not the updated version, yeah. Okay. If I will try to bring the job creation law from different perspective, because I believe from the previous presentations we have seen already some article what is change and then what is the previous articles, but then here I will try to bring from different perspective only what have changed, and at the end we will talk on what benefits that we can leverage from this change. Number one is about foreign workers. If you see in the job creation law, the RPPKA for certain purpose and roles won't be needed anymore, and there will be no IMTA as well for certain positions. And there is also exclusions of mentee and training for certain positions as well. This is very critical because we know that I believe all of you have experience on how you start the process if you integrate the new employee foreign workers, and it will take some time to complete while the business cannot wait until tomorrow. If we say now, we should start now. So this is a very good progress actually if we see from the foreign workers perspective. And then secondly, fixed term employment agreement. No time limit, but of course there is still some articles mentioning what kind of job that can be put under fixed term employment agreement. But then from the time limit perspective, we don't find in the new job creation law. And there is also good things that compensation money should be paid at the end of any fixed term employment agreement. Of course, we are still waiting for derivative regulations. We understand that there will be like around 17 regulations should be issued. And I heard, based on my discussion with some people yesterday, it should be released shortly within a week, but hopefully it can be faster because we found some complexity right now on implementing this new law because we don't have the derivative regulations. On the outsourcing, it has been explained previously by James as well. There is a removal of jobs that can be outsourced, so they don't limit on the for certain positions or roles. But then we need still to wait what will be regulated in the new regulations. And then no requirement to sign agreement related to the outsourcing. Actually, this is to put back the agreement related to third party under the different law. Because actually this is not part of manpower law, but different law in Indonesia. We have like Kitab Undang-Undang Hukum Perdata or Perdata Umum. So it's kind of conflict regulations if they put this kind of agreement with the third party also inside the manpower law. And then protections related to the wages, welfare is owned by outsourcing company. If you still remember previously, if there is any risk procured between the outsourcing company with the users, the responsibility could be borne by the user, which is us as an employer, not by the outsourcing companies, until to the transfer of the employment. This is quite rigid regulations, but with this new one, they will put the responsibility to each employer. So if there is any conflict or any dispute between the employees, it will be the responsibility of the outsourcing companies, so not the users anymore. On the sovereign package, again, we are still waiting for the regulations, but we understand that there is a removal of 15% housing, medical, healthcare, and allowance. Again, because when we actually try to track what is the reason of 15%, it will be very challenging to give some justifications. Because, for example, for the housing, actually, if you don't provide now housing to the employees, so what's the point we give the housing as a multiplier? And also medical, we understand that all companies are obliged to provide health insurance to the employees. So why we should have this kind of calculation put in the severance again. And the multiplication factor, again, we are still waiting for the regulations, but we understand from different sources, I believe all of us knows as well, that will be max 19 times plus 6 times, which is paid by the government. Simply they reduce the multiplications when there is a certain termination, such as death and then retirement. But we don't know. Different information say that only for death and retirement. So only for these two cases, they still put multiplier, but the rest no. But let's see. And then the remunerations, no sectoral minimum wage, regency or district minimum wage can be determined if it meets the requirements, such as economic growth and inflations. and then it is based on the units of time on outcome. This is very interesting. We will go deeper on that on the next slide. Wages based on units of time and outcome. And then the termination process, also termination notifications to affected employee or labor union, this is new. But this is not required for resignations or end of the fixed term employment agreement, retirement, and death. And then for this is a minor, I think, like job training. But then if we come back to the previous slide, because one of the reason why there is job creation law, the government would like to improve the quality of our workers in Indonesia. So without skillful employees, the demographic bonus will be useless. So that's why it becomes also one of the important part in this new law. Working hours and rest time, we understand that there is an increase in overtime from 3 hours to 4 hours max. And for social security, this is also still questions. There will be creation of job security amounted maximum 6 months salary, and then plus access to the job market and the training. Then now the questions how much is the 6 months salary, because from different sources we got that it can be it might not be as big as the last drawn salary. There will be a cap, but let's see what will be the new regulation says. So this is what have changed so far, and let's see as an HR practitioners how we can leverage these changes. Maybe we can move Emmanuel to the next slide. Okay, so the future of work, contingent labor. I think it touched a few times already by previous presenter. This is very interesting because with this new regulations, actually, government would like to give opportunity for contingent labor or for the gig workers. For example, our opportunity to employ a very short-term employees will be facilitated or accommodated with these new regulations. Currently, it will be challenging for us. For example, if we want to employ someone that can work only 3 hours per day for 2 weeks, for example. We don't have any kind of regulations that can be followed for this kind of agreement. But going forward, we can use the job creation law. It will be very good because we will have so many millennials, and they don't want. Not all of them are comfortable to have like a first term, like a permanent employment or open-ended employment agreement. And then, secondly, not everyone is ready to work full time as well. Sometimes, for example, if I'm a student, so I go to the school, for example, morning to afternoon time, and I want to take like a part-time job in a restaurant or after school. This new creation law will accommodate that kind of employment agreement. Maybe this kind of things we can only found overseas right now, but not in Indonesia. But going forward, it will be very interesting for us, and it will give us some flexibility on managing our workforce costs. But there is a cons here for sure that we need to anticipate as well as an HR before we start to, if we want or if we have planned to try to leverage these new regulations. Number one is communications, because if we have contingent labor, managing communication with them will not be easy. because they will not come to the office maybe every day. Maybe they are only a very short period of time. And then also understanding the employment agreement, because maybe they don't have an experience to have full-time employment agreement, so they don't really understand. It will need extra effort from HR, from the company to explain. And then fragmented management, because in many companies, managed by functions. So if it is managed by functions, different perceptions, a different big picture between one function to another function on how we should utilize the contingent labor. And then recruitment and screening, this is something that needs to be strengthened as well. Because with this kind of employment agreement, you need to be careful to make sure that the people that we hire is really meeting our requirements, and background is also clean, because we will be able to hire people from different locations, different background, and not necessarily they have like a CV like what we have right now. But then the pros, you will get flexibility on managing our accounts faster meaning that if we don't want to do it directly, we have the party that we can leverage. James explained earlier. Of course, most cost-effective hiring process. We can filling the skill gaps as well. Sometimes not all the skill can be fulfilled directly with the normal recruitment process. This will help us to fulfill the gaps, especially when we need that position only for certain period of time. And then fresh perspective, with many people will come and go. It will bring us always fresh perspective rather than only employees that we have for longer period. And then piloting for new roles as well, because sometimes with so many changes around us right now, sometimes we need to create new functions, new role, to try new things in our organization, then we create new roles. If you hire directly permanent, I mean, of course, there will be costs associated to that kind of recruitment. But if you use contingent labor, it will be more flexible and cheaper, of course. But then notes I put here, a few things that we need to prepare. Number one is demand and workforce planning. This is need to be very clear. And of course, the discussion with all functions that we have in our organization should be very thorough to identify the demand. And then we can draft the workforce planning that we need. And then also we need to redefine recruitment and selection process. Like I mentioned earlier, there is a risk as well if we can't define the proper recruitment and selection process for this kind of contingent labor. And the flexi working arrangement as well. We know that many companies have tried to move to the flexi or working arrangements, but there are still a lot organizations have difficulty to move to this kind of arrangement. And development and knowledge management, we know that they will come and go in a very short period of time. How we can define the policy or framework in our organization to make sure when they leave the company, the knowledge is still there. Because it will be very different with our current employment. They will stay with us for 1 year, 2 years, or maybe until retirement. So sometimes companies are not putting right concern on this knowledge management. And of course, engagement and retention. It will be very challenging for us to really engage this kind of contingent labor. It will become our challenge. Of course, we get benefits here, but we also have challenges in the different situations. Even with the longer tenure employee, it will be still very challenging to understand all the employees. While if it is only 3 months, 2 months, how will you engage? So this is something that we need to think as well from people point of view. Secondly is integration of global talents, especially when we are operating in the different markets or different countries. It will be very good for us to integrate global talents, either through short-term assignment like 1 or 3 months or maximum 6 months, or long-term 1 year to 24 months. And of course, international professional hire as well, because we see some relaxations will be accommodated in this new job creation law that help us to be able to integrate global talents. Uh, uh, but of course, from cost perspective, it will be higher. But again, not all skills we can get the supply locally in Indonesia. Sometimes we should look the supply outside Indonesia. Okay, and then for labor cost, supply and governance, of course, from employee point of view, fixed term roles kind of agreement will be more attractive with this new regulation, which is very good. It will help us to get better quality of manpower. Because right now we should admit that to get good quality of people for fixed term agreement is quite challenging right now in our market. But then if it is fixed like permanent employee, then much more easier. Tomorrow the situation could be different. Even though it is fixed term, it will be very attractive for the employee. Then it will give us some benefits to get better quality. Not because the offer could be more attractive, but from the governance point of view, government point of view, if you still remember that there will be also some education support given by the government, and of course there is also compensation money offered to the fixed term role kind of agreement. And then removal non-related responsibilities and okay, okay. And then cost reallocation opportunity. We know that with the new severance package and then remunerations kind of new framework, we should be able to project how many costs that we can transfer for different benefits. For example, improving the development activities or try to create new flexi benefits and many opportunities that we can use when we have an opportunity to reallocate our staff costs that we have right now. Okay, next slide. I think as a close, I won't explain this again, Bapak Ibu semua. We are still waiting for the derivative regulations, peraturan pemerintah. We see here there could be around 17 government regulations before this new job creation law can be implemented fully. All right, I think that's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Rudi, for the insightful talk. Now, for all speakers, can we just turn on your video and unmute yourself, because we will be answering some questions. Sure. Okay. So I think let's start from the, okay, there's one question from Grady. So there's a question to Palvin. They say the two keys for Indonesia's economical bounce back are consumption and investment. What do you think should we focus more on between the two, and why?
Oh, that's a really good question, Grady, and I think it comes down to the simple side that we flashed earlier, right? I think the three components of GDP is obviously consumption, government spending, and investment, right? And I think the large part of our economy, of our GDP, whether it's good and bad, is the consumption, particularly household consumption. So, I think you need to break it down into more short term and the long term, or maybe intermediate term kind of consideration, right? I think what we're seeing right now in the GDP and the contraction is essentially a result of simply lower demand, lower demand because there is lower purchasing power, because there's just no one has money to spend, right? And the most vulnerable level of the of the populations are highly exposed, right? Talking about the what we call the buruh harian, ya kan? Orang-orang buruh harian, the daily workers, the daily laborers. Those are the most vulnerable and highly impacted by this, right? So I think that needs to be the focus first and foremost, right? Allow them get money into their pockets, right? Allow them to buy the daily necessities, allow them to survive and so on, which I think is already taking place. Hence, what you're seeing in the slight recovery, right, and then the increase in the government spending, right, but also a recovery in the GDP, because those are the people who are now essentially able to regain control, not regain control, but regain their purchasing power through the subsidies or the supports of the government, right? And then that needs to continue on until the demand at a macro level kind of stabilizes. So some of the challenges that we have right now, and some of the packages that we see the government extending is, let's say, the corporate income tax and things of that nature, right? Heavily, it's a great idea, but it won't materialize unless the demand is there, right? And the demand is not going to be there unless the purchasing power is there. So it's one of those cyclical things, right? So, but in the longer term, the intermediate term, investment is obviously a big one, right? We need investments, we need to build infrastructure and all those things. And that's going to be critical, going to be paramount in Indonesia's ability to reach that ambitious goal of top 5 GDP by 100-year anniversary of our independence, right? 2045. So that, to me, the answer is in two folds, basically. First and foremost is the what do you call it? The pandemic curve, right? Address that, right? Once you address that, then put money in people's pockets, allow them to spend, increase the demand globally, and then that will allow everything else to kind of fall into places naturally, right? And that will allow then the reduction in income tax and everything else to kind of help generate more capital being reinvested into the economy.
Okay, thank you for that. Now another question is from Ricky Marbun to Mr. James. How does Omnibus Law application into the remote work that is currently being developed during the pandemic era? Is there any requirement that the right of the employee working under remote work mode are being protected?
It depends how they're employed. I think really when you look at people who are working remotely at the moment, working from home, that's not affected by Omnibus Law. You're employed either on a full-time basis or on a fixed-term contract. The agreement between yourself and your employer as to where you can work from, that has to be agreed with you and your company. That's not something that will be outlined in the Omnibus Law. What the Omnibus Law is talking about is your contract with your company when you join the business. So to make sure that your rights are protected there. So it's really down to you. If your company's happy with it and they're allowing you to do it, then that's the safer option. And you're following the PSBB guidelines, then there's absolutely no problem with that. Personally for us, we have an online system, cloud-based, and really comes down to the choice. At the moment we're under 50% PSBB, so we've got 50% of the office at home and 50% in, and it's really their choice. If they've got elderly at home, close to parents, if they take public transportation, we always advise stay home. And others don't have good internet connection at home, maybe staying in a small cost, or just prefer to be in the office around people. They're also more than welcome to come in as long as they're following social distancing. So, that's the guidelines that we're following and are currently in place, but Omnibus won't affect anything further than that.
All right, thank you, James, for that. We have another question from Alfari, who would like to speak out their question. So for the moderators, could you please allow Alfari to talk, please?
He's not unmuting his.
Hello, hello.
Hello?
Can you hear my voice?
Yes, we can.
So, sorry, I just click the send button. But my question is like this. So, what HR management will react appropriately because we are facing the COVID pandemic, which will impact negatively to our business continuity, at least for the next 2 years, while it will also change our people workforce strategy, while at the same time, the Omnibus Law will also reduce job security to our people. Questions to Pak Alvin or another speaker. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. So maybe for the speakers, maybe Palvin or Pak Rudy, maybe you would like to take this one?
Yeah, I'm not so sure that the protections of the employee is lower if we compare with with what we have previously. Of course, there is a pro and cons. We don't get this new law doesn't give benefit all to the one side, but try to balance from two sides. If we say that the protection is lower, I'm still difficult for me to conclude because actually some of the protections is even better in this new law. For example, for the fixed term employment agreement, the government still need us to provide compensation money. That's number one. And there is also an access to some benefits provided by the government, what we call it like jaminan kehilangan pekerjaan, including access to the job opportunity and also learning opportunities. But then again, with this only job creation law what we have right now, it will be quite challenging also to conclude. It depends on the government regulation that will come very soon. Then we will get to know and understand what is actually behind of this job creation law. I think that's my comment.
Okay.
Maybe to add to Pak Rudy's, which I think made a very good point. I think a lot of this are still sort of being deliberated right now. Some of the derivative regulations, right? Some of the more provide us better clarity on the execution and the real impacts, right? To be able to quantify and really look at it in a comprehensive way. But the idea again, the underlying spirit of this is obviously to allow a faster growth of the economy, the expansion of the economy, and allowing investments from foreign direct investments, particularly incoming into Indonesia, and making Indonesia as much more appealing and attractive investment destination, right? So some of the I think highlighted by Pak Rudy and James, and I think I even touched on some of these things. And in terms of the labor law, even with some of the changes being introduced and still deliberated for the further details, I'd say it still remains one of the more stringent in the region, to be honest, right? And I've looked at, given who we are and what we do, obviously we look at different countries' labor laws, at least in the region, Southeast Asia, and still Indonesia, from end to end, one of the more rigid and stringent, even with the omnibus. So, but again, it's the idea is to change at the macro level, allow economy to foster the economic growth and increase the the welfare standard of the population, of people from different demographic levels, and and overall bring the economy to a stronger place. So that's probably the best I could summarize it.
Okay, I hope that answers that question. And I think we have time for one more question. I think this can be posted to all of you, actually. So this is from an anonymous attendee. So they would prefer not to say their name. But the question is, in each of your respective companies, how are you planning to exercise the new law to your current and or incoming employees? Maybe James, you would like to start off this one?
Well, I mean, for my employees, our business is predominantly permanent. The people that I employ, the people that I hire myself personally is permanent. That's just the type of people that we employ, the type of level that we employ. And, regardless of how you want to employ them, you've also got to remember that that person's got to want to be employed that way. And still in this country, permanent employment is king. So everyone's looking for much more guarantees, much more stability, and so for my business, that will remain the same. But there's always a changing landscape, and whatever we need, we might have certain projects coming up. I might have people on the finance team who need support, who might need to hire people for 3-month contracts, and this allows them to do that. We can bring in people for shorter periods of time, and those are people that might not have had the chance to get employment elsewhere. So it really is case by case, and it's the same with all of our clients as well. They're predominantly being, hiring is predominantly driven by the market that you're in, and most people here, certainly at the white collar level, are permanent employees. And if you want permanent employees to become contractors, for the most part, they're going to say no. So opportunity and demand, they both have to be there. Supply and demand has to be met. So you will see changes in certain areas, but not sweeping ones across the board. So project-driven areas, as I touched on earlier, where you have companies that are looking to hire, 10, 20, 50, 100 or more people for particular types of projects. They now have the flexibility to do that. And with the landscape that we're in now with COVID, I suspect that there'll be an awful lot of people out there who would be willing to take contracts who wouldn't normally.
I see. Interesting. And maybe some input from you, Pa Rudy?
Yes, sure. Number one, maybe about kind of employment agreement. Maybe I will not talking about employment agreement, but the contingent worker. Actually, contingent worker is not new things, especially in an insurance company. For example, if we compare insurance and banks, there is a quite different of arrangement because we have also different regulators. In insurance company, all the salespersons are actually not employed by the company. This kind of contingent labor practices actually. We see like us here, we have like 4,000 agents. They are not employed by us, and we create kind of different agreement with them as well. But if you go to the banks, all sales employees should be employed by the company. From this perspective, you will see that on how we sizing our headcounts will be very different as well. Secondly, like the contact center in our industry, this is also something that we can utilize through the third party. This is also something that has been there quite some time, so this is not new. But then tomorrow on how we can arrange this kind of arrangement will be much more easier from our industry perspective. But then there are also certain positions that are protected by the law. Again, like financial institutions, we are regulated under OJK. There are also some positions that mandatory should be employed by the company with some of requirements as well. It will be still protected. So we are not only following the job creations law, including the previous manpower law, but also regulations issued by the OJK. I think that's in insurance industry on how we can also leverage different benefits. Of course, right now, as an insurer, we are also trying to automate our processes to make sure that our interaction with the customer will be seamless. And then we try also new things, innovate new things. This is where I can see the opportunity we can leverage this kind of contingent workers. Again, for the traditional kind of insurance organization, of course, we cannot, we don't have much room to leverage these new regulations, but we can see in the different area we can still explore and get some benefits. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, James. Thank you, Parudi. And that has been very, very insightful. Unfortunately, I think we're overrun, and I think we need to close this out. So, but this has been a very fruitful discussion, and I hope that all the attendees here have been has had further insights on the Omnibus Law. Is there any closing words you would like to say? Perhaps James?
Emmanuel, thank you. You did a fantastic job. Alvin, Rudy, really great to present with you guys. Thank you very much for your time and for your questions. Anyone that we haven't had time to cover today, please feel free to reach out to me directly. You can link in with me, ask your questions there. Yeah, more than happy to carry on the discussion and answer your questions as well.
All right. But Alvin, would you like to say a few words before we close it down?
Sorry, I was focusing on answering some of the questions through through the computer here. No, I think it's just been a great session. Humbled to have the opportunity to share the forum with James and Parudi, and thanks a lot for all the audience and some of the good questions. I'm going through them as fast as I can right now and try and give an answer through this whatever open window, whatever Q&A window. So yeah, appreciate it.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you, Parudi. Thank you, James. Thank you, Alvin. We'll be closing down this webinar. Thank you all. Thank you for your attendees. And we look forward to seeing you again. Stay safe, and stay healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
You all.
Thank you all.